Chapter 1. I ducked into the sandwich shop mostly to escape the cold. The wind had been biting all morning, the kind that slipped under your coat and settled right against your bones, and the moment the door swung shut behind me, the warmth hit my face like a blessing. The place was packed lunch rush chaos, people talking over each other, the clatter of trays and the hiss of the espresso machine, but it felt good to be somewhere bright and alive. I joined the end of the line and tried to focus on the menu board overhead. I'd been here a dozen times, but somehow I always forgot what I liked. Too many choices, too many combinations, my brain short-circuited every time. I shifted my weight, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, and tried to decide between the turkey pesto or the roasted veggie. Or maybe the chicken, or someone stepped into line behind me. I didn't look at him at first. I just felt him, a warm presence, steady and quiet in a way that cut through the noise. It was strange, the way my shoulders relaxed without my permission, like my body recognized something my mind didn't. I glanced back. He was handsome in a soft, approachable way. Dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, a coat dusted with snowflakes, eyes the color of a winter sky. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking at me, not intensely, not in a way that made me want to shrink, but with this gentle curiosity. Like he was remembering something. I turned back to the menu quickly, cheeks warming. Great. A cute stranger staring at me while I tried to remember how sandwiches worked. The line moved forward. My turn was coming. My heart sped up for no good reason. I stared at the board again, willing my brain to cooperate. Bread, meat, cheese. Why was this suddenly rocket science? I stepped up to the counter, opened my mouth, and froze. The worker smiled patiently. "What can I get for you?" My mind went blank, completely blank. Before I could panic, the man behind me spoke, his voice warm and certain. "She'll have the rosemary focaccia, toasted. Turkey, provolone, light spinach, extra tomato, no onions, chipotle mayo on the side." I turned around so fast I nearly dropped my purse. He didn't look smug. He didn't look like he was guessing. He just smiled soft, almost apologetic, like he'd said something obvious. The sandwich maker raised an eyebrow. "You two ordering together?" My face went hot. "Oh, no, we're not. I don't." The man behind me chuckled under his breath, and something about the sound tugged at my chest. The worker shrugged and started making the sand, which exactly the way he'd said. And the thing was, it was my order, down to the sauce I always forgot to ask for. I swallowed. "How did you—" He lifted a shoulder. "You just look like someone who'd order that." But the way he said it, gentle, familiar, like he'd watched me order it 100 times, made something flutter low in my stomach. I stepped aside to wait, trying to get my heartbeat under control. He moved up to order his own food, but I could feel his presence like a warm light at my back. Not intrusive, just there. When my sandwich was ready, I grabbed it and turned to leave. He was already watching me, hands in his coat pockets, expression soft in a way that made my breath catch. "Enjoy your lunch," he said. "Thanks. I managed, though my voice came out thinner than I intended." I pushed out into the cold again, the bell above the door chiming behind me. The wind hit my face, but I barely felt it. My heart was still racing, my mind replaying the moment over and over. How did he know my order? Why did it feel like he'd known it forever? I walked down the street in a daze, clutching the warm sandwich to my chest. The city moved around me, cars, chatter, footsteps, but everything felt muted, like I was underwater. It wasn't just that he'd guessed right. It was the way he'd looked at me, like he knew me, like he'd always known me. I shook my head, trying to clear it. It was just a weird coincidence, a lucky guess, a moment I'd laugh about later. But as I turned the corner, I couldn't stop myself from glancing back at the shop windows. Through the glass, I saw him still standing in line, watching me walk away with an expression I couldn't name, something tender, something aching, something that made my chest tighten. And just before he looked down, I saw his lips move, a whisper, a word I couldn't hear, but I knew somehow it was my name. Chapter 2. I couldn't stop thinking about him. All afternoon, the moment replayed in my mind, the way he'd said my sandwich order like it was second nature. The way he'd looked at me with that soft, almost aching familiarity. I told myself it was nothing, a coincidence, a weirdly accurate guess, but the truth was, something about him had stayed with me long after I walked out of that shop. By the time I left work, the sky had turned a pale winter blue, the kind that made the streetlights glow earlier than they should. I wrapped my scarf tighter and started down the sidewalk, my breath fogging in front of me. The city felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. I tried to shake off the strange feeling lingering in my chest. It was just a sandwich shop, just a stranger. Just a moment, but I kept hearing his voice. You just look like someone who'd order that. Why did that feel like more than a guess? I stepped off the curb, lost in thought. A horn blared. I didn't even see the car, just a blur of metal and headlights rushing toward me. My heart lurched into my throat, but before I could react, a hand grabbed my arm and yanked me backward with startling force. I stumbled into a solid chest, breath knocked out of me. Jess, my name, spoken like a prayer. I looked up, and there he was. Nate, his face was inches from mine, eyes wide with fear he was trying desperately to hide. His breath came fast, like he'd sprinted a mile to get to me. His hand was still wrapped around my arm, warm and steady, grounding me in a moment that felt unreal. The car sped past, horn fading into the distance. I swallowed hard. How did you? He exhaled shakily, releasing my arm but staying close enough that I could feel the heat of him. That's the easy one. The easy one. My pulse hammered in my ears. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he scanned the street like he expected danger to leap out from behind a lamppost. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense, his whole body coiled like a spring. Nate, I said softly, talk to me. He finally looked at me, and something in his expression cracked a flicker of pain, of relief, of something deeper I couldn't name. I'm just glad you're okay, he said quietly. I didn't know why, but the sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. We started walking, and he matched my pace without asking. The city hummed around us, cars, footsteps, distant music, but everything felt muted, like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. Do you always show up at the exact right moment? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He gave a small, humorless laugh. Not always, but I try. You make it sound like it's your job. He didn't respond. We walked in silence for a few blocks. Every so often, he glanced at me like he was checking to make sure I was still there, still breathing, still safe. It should have been strange. It should have been too much, but instead it felt comforting, like he'd done it before. When we reached my building, he stopped at the bottom of the steps. The streetlight above us flickered, casting a warm glow over his face. He looked torn, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Thank you, I said softly, for whatever that was. His eyes softened. I'll always come when you need me. The words hit me like a warm wave, familiar, soothing, and terrifying all at once. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but he stepped back, putting distance between us like he was afraid of getting too close. Good night, Jess, he said, voice low. Good night, I whispered. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the soft glow of the streetlights. I watched him until he rounded the corner, my heart still racing from more than just the near accident. When I finally went inside, my hands were trembling, not from fear, from the feeling that something had just shifted, something big, something I didn't understand yet. That night I dreamed of falling, a balcony, a rush of wind, a voice calling my name. I woke up gasping, heart pounding, the echo of Nate's voice lingering in my mind. And for the first time, I wondered if our meeting wasn't a coincidence at all. Chapter 3. I woke up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My alarm buzzed, but I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the dream, the balcony, the fall, the rush of wind, the echo of a voice calling my name. It felt too vivid, too real, like a memory instead of a dream. My chest still ached from the fear of it. And underneath that fear was something else, Nate, his voice, his hands pulling me back from the street. The way he'd said my name like it meant something. The way he'd looked at me afterward, like he was relieved and devastated at the same time. I pressed my palms to my eyes and groaned, "Get a grip, Jess." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like the world had tilted a few degrees overnight. I dragged myself out of bed, got ready for work, and tried to pretend everything was normal. It wasn't. Not even close. The cafe near my office was warm and cozy, all soft lighting and mismatched mugs. I went there every morning, always ordering the same thing, chamomile tea with honey. It was my comfort drink, my grounding ritual. I stepped inside, inhaling the familiar scent of baked pastries and citrus cleaner. The barista smiled at me. "Morning, Jess, morning," I said, trying to sound more awake than I felt. I moved to the end of the counter to wait for my drink and froze. Nate was there, sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a mug, watching the door like he'd been waiting for someone. When he saw me, his expression softened instantly, like a tension he'd been holding finally eased. My heart did a weird little flip. He stood and walked over, stopping just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," I echoed, suddenly aware of every breath I took. He glanced at the cup the barista set down for me. "Chamomile with honey." I blinked. "How did you—" He hesitated, then shrugged. "You just seem like someone who'd drink that." There it was again, that same line, that same gentle certainty. It should have been strange. It should have made me wary. Instead, it made something inside me soften. "Do you come here often?" I asked, then immediately regretted how cliché it sounded. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, only when I need to. I frowned. Need to what? He looked away, jaw tightening. "Never mind." Before I could push, he changed the subject. "Rough night." I stiffened. "How did you know I—" "You look tired," he said quickly. "That's all." But it wasn't all. I could feel it. He knew more than he was saying. He always did. I took a slow sip of my tea, trying to steady myself. I had a weird dream. His shoulders tensed. About what? I hesitated. I didn't know why I trusted him, but I did. A balcony, and falling. His breath hitched so quietly I almost missed it. "Jess," he said softly, "dreams can feel real sometimes. Doesn't mean anything's wrong." But his eyes said the opposite. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to the dream, to Nate, to the strange coincidences piling up like clues in a mystery I didn't know I was part of. By lunchtime, I needed air. I stepped outside, letting the cold wind clear my head. I walked aimlessly, hands shoved in my pockets, until I found myself near the bookstore I loved. I ducked inside, grateful for the quiet. I wandered the aisles, running my fingers along the spines of books I'd read a dozen times. The familiar comfort helped until I heard humming, a soft melody, gentle, nostalgic, my grandmother's lullaby. I froze. I hadn't heard that tune since I was a child. I hadn't hummed it in years. No one else knew it. I turned slowly. Nate stood at the end of the aisle, hands in his coat pockets, humming the last few notes before he realized I was staring at him. His eyes widened. "Jessie, how do you know that song?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. He swallowed. "I don't know. It just came to me. That's not an answer." He looked pained, like he wanted to tell me everything but couldn't. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, Nate," I said, stepping closer. "What's going on?" He shook his head, backing up a step. "I can't, not yet." "Why not?" "Because you're not ready." The words hit me like a cold wave. Ready for what? I whispered. He closed his eyes, exhaling shakily, for the truth. Before I could say anything else, he turned and walked out of the store, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my mind spinning. That night I dreamed again, the balcony, the fall, the rush of wind, the sound of my own scream, and Nate reaching for me, face twisted in anguish, calling my name like it was the last thing he'd ever say. I woke up gasping, tears on my cheeks. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and a message from Nate. "Are you okay?" My breath caught. How did he know? I stared at the screen, heart racing, fingers trembling. Something was happening. Something big. Something I wasn't ready for, but couldn't escape. And deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, a truth whispered through me like a memory. This wasn't the first time. Chapter 4. I left work later than usual, hoping the extra time would help me shake the strange heaviness that had been clinging to me all day. But it didn't. If anything, the quiet office only made it worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dream again. The balcony, the fall, the way the wind had roared in my ears. And underneath it all, Nate's voice calling my name like he was losing me. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, just my imagination, but the truth was harder to ignore. Something was happening, and I didn't understand any of it. By the time I stepped outside, the sky had shifted into that soft winter twilight, the kind that made the streetlights glow early and turned the air crisp enough to sting my cheeks. I wrapped my coat tighter and started down the sidewalk, letting the cold settle around me. Maybe it would clear my head. Maybe it would make everything feel normal again. I passed the construction site on the corner, the one I'd walked by 100 times without thinking. The scaffolding towered overhead, wrapped in orange netting that fluttered in the wind. A few workers were still packing up, their voices echoing off the metal beams. I barely glanced at them. I was too lost in my thoughts, too wrapped up in the memory of Nate's face in the bookstore, the way he'd looked at me like he was holding back a truth that hurt to carry. Then I heard it, a sharp metallic creak. I looked up just in time to see the sign above me, one of those temporary ones bolted to the scaffolding, hanging by a single screw, swaying dangerously. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't even have time to move. Something slammed into me from the side. I stumbled backward, hitting the ground hard as the sign crashed exactly where I'd been standing. Splinters flew across the pavement. My heart hammered against my ribs, and for a moment all I could do was stare at the shattered pieces. Then I heard him, Jess. I looked up, breathless. Nate was kneeling beside me, his chest rising and falling like he'd sprinted the entire block. His eyes were wide with fear, raw, unfiltered fear, and his hands hovered near my shoulders like he wanted to touch me, but wasn't sure if he should. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice tight. I don't think so." My voice shook. "How did you—" He closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling shakily. "It's happening sooner this time." The words sent a chill through me. "What is?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and offered me his hand. I hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was warm and steady, grounding me in a way that made my breath catch. He pulled me to my feet, but he didn't let go right away. His thumb brushed my knuckles just once, just enough to make my heart stutter. "Nate," I said softly, "you have to tell me what's going on." He shook his head, jaw tightening. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because if I tell you too soon—" He swallowed hard. "It gets worse." I stared at him, trying to make sense of the fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear for himself. It was fear for me, and that terrified me more than the falling sign. He finally released my hand and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to scare you. You're not scaring me." I lied. He gave a small, sad smile. "You should be." The wind picked up, rustling the loose edges of the construction tarp. Nate glanced at the fallen sign, then back at me, his expression darkening. "I need to walk you home," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. We walked in silence, the city humming around us. Nate stayed close, his eyes constantly scanning the street, the rooftops, the shadows. It was like he expected danger to leap out at any moment. I watched him from the corner of my eye. The tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched every time a car passed too close, the way he angled his body slightly toward me like he was ready to shield me from anything. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. "Yes," he murmured, "I do." There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt, just certainty, like he'd said those words before. When we reached my building, he stopped at the bottom of the steps. The streetlight above us flickered, casting a warm glow over his face. He looked torn, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. "Thank you," I said softly, for whatever that was. His eyes softened. "I'll always come when you need me." The words hit me like a warm wave, familiar, soothing, and terrifying all at once. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but he stepped back, putting distance between us like he was afraid of getting too close. "Good night, Jess," he said, voice low. "Good night." I whispered. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the soft glow of the streetlights. I watched him until he rounded the corner, my heart still racing from more than just the near accident. When I finally went inside, my hands were trembling, not from fear, from the feeling that something had just shifted, something big, something I didn't understand yet. That night I dreamed again, the balcony, the fall, the rush of wind, the sound of my own scream, and Nate reaching for me, face twisted in anguish, calling my name like it was the last thing he'd ever say. I woke up gasping, tears on my cheeks, and for the first time I wasn't sure if the dream was a warning or a memory. Chapter 5. I didn't want to fall asleep that night. I tried everything to stay awake, reading, cleaning, scrolling through my phone, but exhaustion pulled at me like a tide. And when I finally drifted off, the dream came for me immediately. It wasn't like the others. This one felt real. I stood on a balcony I didn't recognize, overlooking a city that wasn't mine. The air was warm, thick with the scent of jasmine and something sweet I couldn't name. Lanterns glowed along the railing, casting soft gold light across stone tiles. I wore a dressy, long, flowing, unfamiliar. My hair was different too, heavier, braided with ribbons, and someone was behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. I felt him, Nate, not the Nate I knew now, but a version of him from another time, clothes different, hair longer, eyes the same impossible blue. He stepped closer, his hand brushing my arm, and the touch sent a shiver through me. "You're safe," he whispered. But the moment he said it, the wind shifted, the lanterns flickered, the balcony groaned beneath my feet. I turned just as the railing snapped. I fell. The world tilted, the sky spinning above me, and I reached out instinctively, reaching for him. Nate lunged, his face twisted in terror, fingers brushing mine but not catching. "Jess." His voice tore through the dream, raw and desperate. And then everything went black. I woke up screaming. My heart pounded against my ribs, my sheets tangled around me like restraints. My breath came in sharp, panicked gasps, and tears blurred my vision. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady myself, but the memory, because it felt like a memory, clung to me like smoke. Before I could fully catch my breath, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, and a message, "Are you okay?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't made a sound outside my apartment. I hadn't called him. I hadn't texted him, but somehow he knew. My hands trembled as I typed back. "How did you know?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'm outside. Can I come up?" I didn't even think. I just got out of bed, wrapped myself in a sweater, and opened the door. Nate stood in the hallway, hair messy, breath uneven like he'd run the whole way. The moment he saw me, his expression crumpled, relief and fear and something deeper all tangled together. "Jess," he breathed, stepping inside before I could invite him. "What happened?" I swallowed hard. I had a dream. His jaw tightened. "Tell me." I hesitated, but something in his eyes, something raw and pleading, made it impossible to hold back. I was on a balcony. I whispered, "Not here, somewhere else," and you were there. You looked different, but it was you, and then the railing broke and I fell and—" My voice cracked. Nate closed his eyes like the words physically hurt him, and you called my name. I finished softly, "Like you were losing me." He opened his eyes again, and they were shining not with tears, but with something close. "Jess," he said, voice low and rough, "I'm so sorry." "For what?" I whispered, "For all of it." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps before stopping in front of me again. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a confession he wasn't sure he was allowed to make. "I didn't want you to remember like this," he said. "Not through fear, not through nightmares. Remember what?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He met my gaze, and for the first time he didn't look away. "Me," he said us. My breath caught. He stepped closer, slowly, like he was afraid I might bolt. "Jess, I've known you before, in another life, in many lives." The room tilted slightly, but I didn't move. "You died," he whispered, "and I couldn't save you." A tremor ran through me. "Nate, I promised myself I'd find you again," he said, voice breaking, "and I did, every time, but you never remember me until it's too late." I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "That's impossible. I know how it sounds," he said softly, "but you dreamed it, you felt it, you saw me." I shook my head, but the denial felt weak. "Dreams aren't memories. Yours are," he said. "They always have been." I took a shaky breath. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because if I tell you too early," he swallowed hard, "it accelerates things, the danger, the ending. Ending." The word lodged in my chest like a stone. I stepped back, needing space, needing air. Nate didn't follow. He just watched me with that same haunted tenderness, like he was memorizing me in case he lost me again. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You will," he said, "soon." I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to make sense of the impossible. "Nate, who was I to you?" He hesitated, pain flickering across his face. "Everything," he said. The word hit me like a warm, devastating wave. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. All I knew was that something inside me, something deep and old, stirred at his words. He took a small step back, giving me space. "I shouldn't have come. I felt you wake up. I felt your fear." "How?" I whispered. He shook his head. "I'll explain. I promise. Just not tonight." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "I'm sorry, Jess," he said softly, "for everything you're remembering, and everything you're about to." Then he left. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there in the quiet, heart racing, mind spinning, the echo of his confession lingering in the air. I didn't know what was real anymore, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was happening between us, it didn't start in this life. Chapter 6. I barely slept after Nate left. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the balcony again, the lanterns, the warm night air, the moment the railing gave way. And always, always, Nate's face as he reached for me. It felt like a memory wearing the clothes of a dream, too vivid to dismiss, too impossible to accept. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he'd said. "I've known you before. You died. I couldn't save you." The kind of confession no one should be able to say with such certainty. The kind that should have sent me running. But instead, it left me aching with a strange, impossible familiarity. By morning, I knew I couldn't pretend any more. I needed answers, real ones, not half-truths or cryptic warnings. I needed to understand what was happening to me, what was happening to us. So after pacing my apartment for an hour, I grabbed my coat and walked to the only place I knew he'd be. He was already there, standing outside my building like he'd been waiting all night. His hands were shoved into his coat pockets, his hair tousled by the wind, his eyes fixed on the ground. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up, and the moment our eyes met, something inside me cracked open. "Jess," he said softly, like my name was a fragile thing. I didn't stop walking until I was standing right in front of him. Tell me everything." He closed his eyes, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for centuries. "Are you sure?" "No," I admitted, "but I need to hear it anyway." He nodded once, a small, resigned motion, and gestured toward the park across the street. We walked in silence, the winter air crisp around us, the world still quiet from the early hour. We found a bench beneath a bare tree, and Nate sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at his hands like they held the whole story. "When I met you in the sandwich shop," he began, "it wasn't the first time I'd seen you, not even close." I swallowed hard. "You said you've known me before." He nodded, "In another life, in many lives." The words hung between us, heavy and unreal. "In our first life," he continued, "you were different, powerful. People loved you, people feared you. You had this light about you, this intuition, this magic, that made the world feel alive." He paused, searching for the right words, "and I loved you, completely, without hesitation." My breath caught. "What happened?" His jaw tightened. "Someone envied you, envied what you could do, envied what we had. They cursed us." He looked at me then, eyes full of centuries of grief. "They cursed you." I felt the truth of it settle into my bones, cold and familiar. "What kind of curse?" "One that binds us together." He said, "But not in the way you'd think. You forget me every lifetime, completely, and his voice broke. "I remember everything." A tremor ran through me, every life. He nodded, "Every moment, every version of you, every time I find you, every time I lose you." I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady the ache blooming there. "And I always die." "Yes." His voice was barely a whisper. "Young, suddenly, before you remember me fully, before you can break the curse." I stared at him, the pieces clicking together in a way that made my stomach twist. The dreams, the déjà vu, the way he always knew where I was, what I needed, how to save me. "The dreams are memories," I whispered. He nodded. "Fragments, echoes. The curse tries to keep them buried, but it can't stop everything." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of lifetimes carried alone. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because if I tell you too early," he said, "the curse accelerates, the danger comes faster, the ending comes faster." He swallowed hard. "I wanted to give you time. I wanted you to live." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. "Nate," he reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed the tear away with his thumb. The touch was soft, reverent, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. "I've watched you die more times than I can bear," he whispered. "I've held you in my arms as you slipped away. I've begged for one more moment, one more chance, and every time I wake up in a new life, remembering everything while you remember nothing." My heart broke for him, for us, for the impossible tragedy woven through our lives, but this time is different. He said, voice trembling with something like hope, "You're remembering sooner, the dreams are coming earlier, the signs are stronger. I think you're close." "Close to what?" I asked. "To breaking it." The wind rustled the branches above us, scattering a few brittle leaves across the path. I stared at him, my pulse thrumming with fear and something deeper, something warm and ancient. "What happens if I break it?" I whispered. His eyes softened, filling with a tenderness that made my breath catch. "Then you live, we both live together, without fear, without endings." I felt the truth of it settle into me like a warm glow, but beneath that warmth was a shadow, a memory of falling, of wind, of Nate's voice calling my name. "How did I die?" I asked quietly. He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. "You fell. The balcony gave way. I tried to reach you. I tried so hard, but I wasn't fast enough." A shiver ran through me, and now it's happening again. "Yes," he said. "The curse repeats the pattern, the same danger, the same signs, the same ending unless you change it." I took a shaky breath. "How?" He shook his head. "I don't know. You're the only one who can break it. You always have been." I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of a destiny I didn't ask for but somehow recognized. "I'm scared." I admitted. "I know," he said softly, "but you're stronger than you think. You always were." I looked up at him, and for a moment the world felt still, like time itself was holding its breath. Nate's eyes were full of centuries of love and loss, and something inside me, something deep and old, stirred in response. "I don't want to lose you again," he whispered. "You haven't lost me," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Not yet," he exhaled shakily, like my words were the first real hope he'd had in lifetimes. We sat there in the quiet, the winter air swirling around us, the truth of our past lives settling between us like a fragile, glowing thread. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt like I was waking up. Chapter 7. I spent the next few days walking around with the strange, heavy awareness that my life was no longer just mine. Every sound felt sharper, every shadow deeper, every familiar street suddenly threaded with the possibility of danger. And through it all, Nate hovered at the edges of my world close enough to protect me, far enough to keep from overwhelming me, always watching with that quiet, aching tenderness that made my chest tighten. I didn't know how to act around him anymore. Part of me wanted to run into his arms and demand he tell me everything, every detail of every life we'd shared. Another part wanted to run in the opposite direction, terrified of what remembering might cost me. But the dreams kept coming, each one clearer than the last, each one pulling me deeper into a past I didn't fully understand. The first sign that things were escalating came on a Thursday morning. I was walking down the stairwell in my building, half awake, half lost in thought, when my foot slipped on a patch of water someone had tracked in. My stomach lurched as my heels skidded out from under me. For a split second, I felt weightless falling, always falling, and the memory of the balcony slammed into me so hard I gasped. Before I could tumble down the stairs, a hand grabbed my arm. Nate. He was suddenly there, breathless, eyes wide with fear he didn't bother to hide. His grip was firm, steady, grounding me in a moment that felt too familiar. "Jess," he whispered, voice shaking. "Are you okay?" I clung to the railing, heart pounding. I think so." He didn't let go until he was sure I had my balance. Even then, his hand hovered near my back like he was ready to catch me again. That wasn't supposed to happen yet. He murmured under his breath. I stiffened. "What do you mean yet?" He closed his eyes, jaw tightening. The pattern is accelerating, faster than before. A chill ran through me. "Because I'm remembering. Yes," he said softly, "and because the curse knows it." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. "What happens if it accelerates too much?" He looked at me, then really looked at me, and the fear in his eyes was enough to make my knees weaken. "I lose you sooner." The words hit me like a blow. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just let him walk me the rest of the way down the stairs, his presence warm and protective beside me. The day didn't get easier. Everywhere I went, I felt the echo of something watching me. Not a person, not a presence, but a pattern. A thread pulling tight, a story trying to repeat itself, and every time I felt that invisible tug, Nate appeared. At the cafe, outside my office, on the sidewalk when I left for lunch. He didn't hover, didn't smother, but he was always there, always close, always ready. By evening, the tension in my chest felt like a knot I couldn't untangle. I walked home slowly, the winter air crisp against my cheeks. The city lights blurred slightly as I blinked away the exhaustion. When I reached my building, Nate was already waiting by the door, leaning against the brick wall with his hands in his pockets. "You felt it too," he said quietly. I nodded all day. He stepped closer, his expression softening. "It's not your fault. It feels like it is, it isn't," he said firmly. "You're remembering. That's what's supposed to happen." I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of something ancient pressing against my ribs. "I keep seeing things, little flashes, a house with stone walls, a garden with lanterns, a room with blue curtains, and you." His breath caught. "What do you see of me?" I hesitated, then met his gaze. "You're always reaching for me." His eyes closed, pain flickering across his face. "I always am." The vulnerability in his voice made my heart ache. I reached out without thinking, my fingers brushing his sleeve. He looked down at my hand like it was something sacred. "Jess," he whispered, "I've never been this scared in any lifetime." "Why?" My voice was barely a breath. "Because you're remembering faster than ever," he said, "and because the closer you get to the truth, the closer the curse gets to repeating the ending." I swallowed hard. The balcony. Yes. A tremor ran through me. "Nate, what if I can't stop it?" He stepped closer, his warmth wrapping around me like a shield. "You can. You're stronger than you know. You always were." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe I wasn't doomed to repeat the same tragedy over and over. But the fear lingered, heavy and cold. That night the dream came again, but this time it was different. I stood on the balcony, the lanterns glowing softly around me. The air was warm, the night alive with distant music. I wore the same dress, felt the same breeze, heard the same creak of the railing. But this time I didn't fall. This time I turned, and Nate was there, closer than before, his hand already reaching for mine. His eyes were full of love and fear, and something fierce and unbreakable. "Jess," he whispered, "don't let go." I woke up with tears on my cheeks and a strange, powerful certainty blooming in my chest. The curse wasn't just repeating. It was warning me, preparing me, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was drowning in the memories. I felt like I was getting ready to fight them. Chapter 8. I woke up the next morning with the dream still clinging to me like mist-warm lantern light, the sound of distant music, the feeling of Nate's hand brushing mine as the world tilted beneath my feet. But this time the dream didn't end with the fall. This time I saw the moment before it, the moment I turned toward him. The moment I reached for him not out of fear, but out of love. It felt like a memory I'd lived 1,000 times and forgotten just as many. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, letting the pieces settle. The dreams weren't random. They weren't nightmares. They were warnings, echoes, clues, and the more I remembered, the more the curse tightened around us. I could feel it now, like a thread pulling taut, like a storm gathering just out of sight. By the time I finally got out of bed, my chest felt heavy with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or inevitability, or the strange, aching certainty that something was coming for me, and it wasn't going to wait much longer. I found Nate outside my building again. He didn't pretend he was just passing by. He didn't offer an excuse. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on me with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. "You dreamed again," he said quietly. I nodded. It was clearer this time. He swallowed, his jaw tightening. "Tell me." I hesitated, but the truth was already burning in my chest. I remembered the moment before I fell. I turned toward you. I reached for you. His breath caught. "Jess," and I wasn't afraid. I whispered, not of the fall, not of you. I wanted to be close to you. He closed his eyes, like my words were both a blessing and a wound. "That's how it was. Every time, you always trusted me, even when you didn't remember me yet." I stepped closer, drawn to him by something older than this life. "Why does it hurt so much?" I asked. "Why does remembering feel like losing something I never had?" "Because you did have it," he said softly. "You had me, and I had you, and losing you," his voice cracked, it broke me, every time. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to comfort someone who'd carried centuries of grief alone. So I just reached out and touched his hand. He looked down at our fingers like the contact was something sacred. We walked together, not speaking, just breathing the same cold morning air. The city moved around us, cars, footsteps, distant chatter. But everything felt muted, like the world was giving us space to unravel. When we reached the park, Nate stopped beneath a bare tree and turned to me. Jess, there's something you need to remember before the final echo hits. My heart stuttered. What is it? He hesitated, pain flickering across his face. The moment you died. A chill ran through me. I don't want to remember that. I know, he said gently, but you have to. It's the only way to break the curse. You have to understand what happened. You have to see it. I shook my head, tears burning behind my eyes. Nate, I don't want to relive that. I don't want to feel it. He stepped closer, cupping my cheek with a tenderness that made my breath catch. You won't be alone this time. I'm here. I'm right here. His touch was warm, grounding, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. I closed my eyes, leaning into his palm, letting the warmth seep into me, and then it happened. The memory hit me like a wave. The balcony, the lanterns, the warm night air, the sound of laughter drifting from inside, Nate's hand brushing mine. The creak of the railing, the moment it gave way, the rush of wind, the terror in his voice, the way his fingers slipped from mine, the way the world tilted and spun, the way everything went silent. I gasped, stumbling backward, and Nate caught me instantly, arms wrapping around me like he'd been waiting for this moment. I clung to him, shaking, the memory still echoing through me like a scream. I remember. I whispered, voice breaking. I remember everything. He held me tighter, his breath warm against my hair. I'm so sorry, he murmured. I'm so sorry. I buried my face in his chest, letting the tears come. The memory wasn't just painful, it was devastating. It was love and loss and fear and longing all tangled together. It was the moment everything had gone wrong. The moment the curse had taken hold. When I finally pulled back, Nate brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. You're stronger than you know, he said softly. You always were. I took a shaky breath. What happens now? He looked away, his expression darkening. The final echo is coming. The moment the curse tries to repeat itself. The balcony. I whispered. Yes, a tremor ran through me. Nate, what if I can't stop it? He stepped closer, his forehead resting gently against mine. You can, he said. You're the only one who can, and I'll be with you every second. I won't let you fall again. His breath mingled with mine, warm and steady. For a moment the world felt still, like time itself was holding its breath. I'm not afraid any more, I whispered. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. You will be, he said softly, but that's okay. Fear doesn't stop you. It never has. I felt the truth of that settle into me like a spark. The curse wasn't just a story. It wasn't just a memory. It was a pattern, a cycle, a trap, and I was finally ready to break it. That night I dreamed again, but this time I didn't fall. This time I stood on the balcony and faced the moment head-on. The railing creaked, the lanterns flickered, the wind rose, and Nate reached for me, eyes full of fear and love, and something fierce and unbreakable. Jess, he whispered, don't let go. And I didn't. I woke with my heart pounding and a strange, powerful certainty blooming in my chest. The final echo was coming, and this time I wasn't going to die. Chapter 9. I felt it the moment I woke up, a heaviness in the air, a tension humming beneath my skin, the kind of quiet that comes right before a storm breaks. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to steady my breathing. I knew what today was. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. The final echo, the moment the curse would try to repeat itself, the moment everything could end. I got out of bed slowly, my legs unsteady, my heart already racing. The apartment felt too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. I moved through the motions of my morning coffee, shower, clothes, but everything felt distant, muted, like I was watching myself from somewhere far away. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was a pale, washed-out blue, the winter air sharp against my cheeks. And Nate was there. He stood at the bottom of the steps, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fear and determination that made my chest tighten. He didn't smile, he didn't pretend, he just looked at me like he was memorizing me, "It's today," I said softly. He nodded once. "Yes." I swallowed hard. "Are you going to tell me what happens?" His jaw tightened. "You already know." I did. Deep down, beneath the fear and the memories and the strange, ancient ache in my chest, I knew exactly what was coming. The balcony, the fall, the moment everything had gone wrong in our past life. But this time, I wasn't going to let it happen. We walked together without speaking, our steps slow, our breaths visible in the cold air. Nate stayed close, his presence warm and steady beside me. Every so often, he glanced at me like he was checking to make sure I was still there, still breathing, still alive. And every time he did, something inside me softened. When we reached my building, he hesitated. "Jess, maybe you shouldn't go up there." I shook my head. "If I run from it, it'll just find me another way. You said it yourself, the curse repeats the pattern." His eyes darkened. "I don't want to lose you again. You won't," I whispered, though fear curled tight in my stomach. "Not this time." He exhaled shakily, like he wanted to believe me but didn't know how. I reached out and took his hand, threading my fingers through his. His breath caught, and he held on like he'd been waiting lifetimes for me to do that. We climbed the stairs together, step by step, the air growing heavier with every floor. When we reached my apartment, I paused with my hand on the doorknob, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Stay close," I whispered. "I always do." He murmured. I opened the door. Everything looked normal. Quiet, still. But I felt it, the pull, the echo, the invisible thread tugging me toward the balcony. My breath hitched. Nate's hand tightened around mine. "Jess," he said softly, "you don't have to." "Yes," I whispered. "I do." I walked toward the balcony, each step slow and deliberate. The glass door reflected my face, pale, tense, determined. I slid it open, and the cold air rushed in, sharp and biting. The balcony stretched out before me, the railing gleaming faintly in the winter light. I stepped outside. The moment my foot touched the concrete, the world shifted, a creak, a groan, a sound I knew too well. The railing shuddered. "Jess." Nate's voice cracked behind me. I turned just as the metal gave way beneath my hands. The world tilted, the sky spun, my stomach lurched, I slipped, but this time I didn't scream. This time I remembered. I grabbed the broken railing, my fingers burning as the metal scraped my skin. My feet dangled over the edge, the wind roaring in my ears, but I held on with everything I had. My muscles trembled, my arms shaking, but I didn't let go. "Jess." Nate lunged toward me, but the curse tightened around him like invisible chains. He stumbled, falling to his knees, unable to reach me. His face twisted in terror. "No, no, not again." "Jess, please, I'm okay." I gasped, though my grip was slipping. "Nate, I'm okay." But the balcony wasn't done. The remaining section of railing groaned, the concrete beneath Nate's feet cracking. He looked down just as the floor shifted, pulling him toward the edge. "Nate." I screamed. He tried to scramble back, but the balcony lurched violently, dragging him closer to the drop. His hand shot out, reaching for anything, anyone, and I moved. I swung my weight, using the momentum to haul myself upward. My arms screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. I planted my foot on the ledge, pushed hard, and threw myself back onto the balcony floor. I didn't even catch my breath. I lunged for Nate. He was sliding toward the edge, fingers clawing at the concrete, eyes wide with the same terror I'd seen in my dreams. I grabbed his arm, anchoring myself against the doorframe, pulling with everything I had. "Jess," his voice broke. "Let go. You'll fall." "No." I gasped, tightening my grip. "Not this time." The balcony groaned again, the concrete cracking beneath us, but I held on. I pulled, I fought. I refused to let him slip away. And then, with one final desperate heave, I dragged him back onto solid ground. We collapsed together, tangled in each other's arms, shaking, breathless, alive. For a long moment neither of us spoke. We just held each other, our hearts pounding in sync, the cold air swirling around us like a blessing. Finally, Nate pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes were wet, his voice barely a whisper. "Jess, you broke the pattern." I cupped his face in my hands, my thumbs brushing his cheeks. "I choose you." I whispered, my voice steady and certain. "In this life, in every life, I'd save you back, just like you saved me." The words settled into the air like a promise. And then something shifted. A warmth bloomed around us, soft, golden, weightless. The air hummed. The tension that had wrapped itself around my chest for days loosened, then dissolved entirely. Nate inhaled sharply, his eyes widening as the invisible thread binding us snapped, not with violence, but with release. The curse broke. I felt it. He felt it. The world felt it. Nate let out a shaky breath, his forehead pressing against mine. "It's gone," he whispered. "Jess, it's really gone." I smiled through the tears I hadn't realized were falling. "We're free." He pulled me into his arms again, holding me like he never wanted to let go. And for the first time in any lifetime, we didn't have to. Chapter 10. For a long time after the balcony stopped shaking, Nate and I just held each other on the floor, our breaths uneven, our hearts pounding in the same frantic rhythm. The cold air rushed in through the broken railing, but I barely felt it. All I felt was him, his arms around me, his heartbeat against my cheek, the way he kept whispering my name like he couldn't believe I was still here. Eventually, he pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes were wet, his face pale, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Jess," he whispered, like the word itself was a miracle, "you saved me." I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, my fingers trembling. "You've saved me in every life," I murmured. It was my turn. He closed his eyes, exhaling shakily, and when he opened them again, something was different. Lighter, unburdened, the haunted look he'd carried since the day I met him, since the day he was born, was gone. In its place was something warm and open and impossibly tender. "It's really gone," he said softly. "The curse, I can't feel it any more." I felt it too, the absence of that invisible weight, the quiet in the air where tension used to hum. It was like the world had exhaled with us, like the universe itself had loosened its grip. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead to his. "We're free." He let out a soft, disbelieving laugh, his hands sliding up to cradle my face. "I never thought I'd hear you say that, not in any lifetime." I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Well, this one's different." He kissed my forehead, lingering there for a moment, breathing me in like he was memorizing the feeling of peace. When he pulled back, he brushed away my tears with his thumbs, his touch gentle and reverent. "Let's get inside," he murmured. "You're freezing." I hadn't even noticed. My whole body felt warm, buzzing with adrenaline and relief. Still, I let him help me up, his hand steady at my waist as we stepped back into the apartment. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing out the cold, and for the first time in days, maybe in lifetimes, I felt safe. We sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, our knees touching, our fingers intertwined. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the faint sound of our breathing. Nate kept looking at me like he couldn't quite believe I was real, like he expected me to vanish if he blinked too long. "Tell me everything," I said softly. "I want to remember it all." He hesitated, his thumb brushing the back of my hand. "Are you sure? Some of it is painful, I know." I whispered, "But it's ours, and I want all of it." He nodded slowly, his eyes softening. "Okay," and he began. He told me about the first life, the one with the lanterns and the jasmine-scented air, the one where I'd been powerful and bright and full of magic. He told me about the nights we spent on that balcony, talking about the future, dreaming about a life we never got to live. He told me about the curse, about the jealousy that sparked it, about the moment everything shattered. He told me about the lifetimes that followed, how he found me again and again, how he watched me grow up in different eras, different cities, different bodies, always with the same spark in my eyes. He told me how he loved me every time, even when I didn't know him yet, especially then. He told me about the endings too, the ones he couldn't stop, the ones that broke him. He spoke quietly, his voice thick with emotion, but there was no bitterness in it, only love, only longing. Only the quiet relief of finally being able to share the weight he'd carried alone. I listened, my heart aching and swelling with every word. Some memories flickered at the edges of my mind, soft, blurry images of places I'd never been, faces I'd never seen, moments I'd never lived. And yet I had, somewhere deep inside I had. When he finished, I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered, "for finding me, for staying, for loving me through all of it." He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "There was never a choice," he murmured. "It was always you." We sat like that for a long time, wrapped in warmth and quiet, and the soft glow of a future that finally felt possible. Eventually, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a gentle exhaustion. Nate shifted slightly, his arm tightening around me. "Come here," he said softly. I curled against him, my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It felt like home, like something I'd been searching for without knowing it, like something I'd had once and lost and finally found again. After a while he whispered, "What do you want to do now?" I smiled, eyes drifting closed. "Live," I said. "With you, without fear, without endings." He let out a soft, contented sigh. "We finally get to." The room grew quieter, the world softer, the future brighter. I felt myself drifting, not into a nightmare or a memory, but into something warm and safe and new. And as I fell asleep in his arms, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This time I wouldn't forget him. This time we had forever,